let's talk about the Odyssey, more specifically books 10 and 11 of the Odyssey, which shows a lot of Odysseus's journey through his many places and wandering isles that he goes to. Um, where this picks up after chapter 9, after the whole ordeal with Polyphemus, the Cyclops, right? All of that stuff happens and he is out to sea. And that's where we pick it up with. Eventually, after a few days of sailing, he reaches the land called Aeolus, right? And there, the king of this island gives him lots of riches and treasure and gold and some important things that we'll talk about. And one of them is a leather bag. He gives him this leather bag and he says, here, this is for you, don't open this, okay? I warn you, just don't open it. And he says, okay, the king sends him on his way after a brief amount of time, showing him hospitality, and he sends him on his way. They're headed home, and after a few days, the men get curious about what's in the bag, and they ask Odysseus, hey, what's in the bag? And he says, don't worry about it. We're not supposed to open it right now. But the men think, you know what? It's probably gold. We should open the bag right now. So when they open the bag, they find that it contains a bunch of winds. So they open the bag, the winds come spraying out of this bag, and they're so fierce. It's this gale of wind that it makes the boat go all the way back to the island where they came from. And Odysseus once again has to go talk to the king, and the king's like, why are you here? He says, well, we may or may not have opened the bag, right? And the king says, oh, okay, what else do you need? And then be on your way, right? This setback is caused by pride on behalf of the men, right? The men don't trust Odysseus. They think he's withholding knowledge from them, withholding riches from them. So they take it upon themselves, as proud people are wont to do, to, open the bag and see what's in it. And it doesn't go well. It sets them back even farther. After that whole ordeal, they get back on the sea, they keep going, they sail for another couple of days, right? They're on the sea for a while, and eventually, not yet, they land at another island, and this island is super important. Because once they get to this island, again, Odysseus sends a crew of his men on land to go find out what this island is all about. They go there, and they find this woman who takes them back home, and while they're there, the three men that are on this expedition to find out what the island is like, the man of the house there decides he's going to seize one of the people and start to eat them. Yes, he's a cannibal, and this is horrifying to the men. So the two other men who aren't being seized by the cannibal run away and scurry back to Odysseus and say, hey, we got to get the heck out of here, right? This is not great. So they do, and they hit the sea again, right? They sail for a few more days, and then they wind up on Circe's island. Now, Circe is a goddess kind of in the same vein as Calypso. So this is kind of just a repeat of the stuff that happens with Calypso. Although Calypso happens later, this is a flashback, remember? So they land on Calypso's island, and it's the same kind of thing, right? We see this powerful goddess who's in control of her space, in control of the world around her, and she does something interesting. Again, Odysseus and a few of his men go on land to find out what this island is all about. They find this woman, they find Circe, and she does something interesting. She gives the men wine, and she has this wand that when the men drink the wine, she can knock them over the head with the wand, and they turn into pigs, right? Like, think for a second about the metaphor to be had there, right? About how this alcoholic beverage and what it does to the men and what that means in the broader spectrum. But Circe decides she's going to keep them there because she really likes piggies and she wants to have this little farm to join all the other piggies that are there as well. Luckily, when this happens to Odysseus, he has been prepped by Hermes, the messenger god, so that when Odysseus goes to drink the wine, he feels a little woozy, but the wand doesn't work on him. He doesn't turn into a pig. And Circe's like, that's strange. That's not supposed to happen, right? You're supposed to turn into a pig. You're not supposed to stay as Odysseus. And Odysseus says, well, I guess I just am that great. And they spend the night together because that's what happens with Odysseus in stories. And eventually, they convince Circe to let them go, right? They say, we need to get home. And Circe says, okay, fine, right? So Circe starts to let them go. And before they do, something really fun happens. And by fun, I mean kind of really sad. Before they leave, the night before, a man by the name of Elpenor, one of Odysseus's men, just one of his crew members, gets really drunk and falls asleep on the roof. He stays the night up there on the roof, and then in the morning when he's all kind of like groggy and waking up, stumbles off of the roof to his death. And his men, Odysseus, see Elpenor and they're like, wow, this is a tragedy. Let's get going. We have a lot of stuff to do. We got to go to the underworld next, so we better get rolling. So they decide they're just going to leave Elpenor's corpse there on the floor in front of Circe's house, not give him any kind of funeral or any of that stuff. So off again they sail, right? This time they're heading to the underworld. They've bested the cannibals. They've survived the encounter with Circe, well, most of them except for Elpenor, and they're going to the underworld to get some direction, right? They're going to meet Hades, right? Now, Hades is both kind of the place and the person. Hades, the god, as the ruler of the underworld, is the person who kind of facilitates the area. He's kind of like the day manager of the underworld. And in the underworld, there's lots of ghosts, right? There's lots of the souls of the people who have died and passed into the underworld. So Odysseus and his men want to go there to get some information. When they do, they eventually encounter a man by the name of Tiresias. Now, Tiresias is blind. And just like the bard Demodocus from the chapter with Alcinous's palace where he's singing, blindness has an extra significance in literature, right? The characters who are blind often can see the most. So this man, Tiresias, is a blind prophet. He is a blind man who sees. And that's super important as well. Tiresias tells Odysseus a couple things. He gives him a prophecy. First thing, the biggest thing that he tells him is, when you get back home to Ithaca, what you need to do is, because you've made Poseidon really mad, is you need to go home and immediately offer him a sacrifice saying, I am sorry. You need to recognize your place, that the gods are above you and you are below them, and you need to defer and offer your apologies because you blinded his son. And that's kind of a horrible thing to do to somebody's son. And then he bragged about it. So Odysseus needs humbling, right? So Tiresias says that. He also says, look, on the way home, you're going to encounter some more stuff. And if you don't handle it properly, you're never going to get home, okay? So you need to do something for me very specifically. He says, at a certain point, you're going to come across the sun god, Helios, and he's going to have this pasture of cattle grazing. I like to call them the sun cows. He says, when you encounter the sun cows, I need you to do something very important for me. I need you to not eat the sun cows. Don't touch them. Don't eat them. Don't look at them. Don't breathe in their direction. Just when you see them, keep sailing past them, okay? Don't do anything to harm them, because if you do that, Helios is going to get really mad, and you already have one Greek god really mad at you right now. I don't think you can handle two, right? So Tiresias tells him all of these things, and Odysseus says, okay, I understand, right? He has taken the prophecy, and now we're going to see what happens with it with the rest of the story. After Tiresias, we get some more ghosts. There's a bunch of ghosts in this chapter, one of them being a woman named Anticlea, who happens to be Odysseus's mother. Now, the last time Odysseus saw Anticlea, she was not in the underworld. So what that means is the last time he saw his mother, she was alive, and now she's not. And that moves Odysseus. Again, we see that he's a man with emotion. He is a man who is not immune to things like sadness or sorrow. And he sees his mother there in the underworld and is so sad. Right? This shows another side of him that we don't always get. We get the macho bravado that he expresses. But this is a softer side of him when he sees his mother there, and it's a very tender moment. They have a brief interaction. He goes to hug her for the last time, and he can't because she's a ghost, right? And she says, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way anymore, right? You need to go home and take care of your family because there's lots of stuff happening over there. So Odysseus kind of makes this promise to himself and to his ghost mom here that he's going to do that. The rest of the chapter has lots of ghosts, right? Look at all these ghosts. There's that guy. There's this crazy looking one. There's this one that's kind of blurry. There's all kinds of ghosts that happen in this chapter after the fact. There's Agamemnon. There's, what's his name? Achilles from the Trojan War. There's a bunch of like women that show up and have a couple, like everybody has a couple things to say. And Odysseus is just speaking to them, right? This is a way for him to gain knowledge through the lives of past lived people. And so there's some interactions. We won't go super into them, but they're there, right? Here's a picture of Agamemnon. This is historically accurate. Then the last ghost to show up is a man named Elpenor. You might remember him as the bloke that fell off of the roof earlier. He's now a ghost in the underworld, and he says, hey, you left my body on the floor at Circe's house. You need to go back and give me an honorable funeral. I served you for years. We encountered cannibals. We encountered storms, gods, monsters, all these things. Go give me a proper burial. So with that, what he's going to end up doing is Odysseus is going to go back to the island where Circe is, back to where Elpenor's body lay, to give him a proper funeral. And that's where the next book, book 12, is going to pick up. So these books are a lot of fun, and if you get the chance, you definitely should read them. But they show a side of Odysseus' journey that is just so fast-paced. If this were a movie, this would be a montage, right? Of him getting to an island, meeting somebody, leaving, getting to an island, a monster being there, leaving, getting to an island, his guy falling off of the roof and then leaving, right? And then going like, this is a man who retraces his steps constantly because there are problems, right? This is about a man who leaves from one place and then has to go back because it didn't go right the first time. He does that a lot. We'll see. And remember, this is a story about homecoming. This is a story about getting back to your countrymen, to your family, to your loved ones. And Odysseus needs to get these elements right. And that's why it takes him 10 years, right? So yes, this is a story about all those things, but this is a story also about if we want to get home to the people that we love, if we want to be reconciled back to their hearts, we need to do things right. Things need to be on the up and up. So that's where Odysseus is at the end of these two books, and it's a really fun story.